we go.
Why is there a black square in it?
Well, we're live now, and you should see the first slide that says welcome. We will be starting soon.
That's what I was.
There is a little bit of a glitch with it. Do you want to try stop sharing and resharing again?
Yeah. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, there was a big black screen, black square.
I did not see that. Take two. How's that look?
Much
Yes.
better.
Ah, there we go. I wonder if it happened because we opened the doors at the same exact time I was sharing, so the parts reassembled weird.
I hear crickets.
Like actual crickets?
Actual crickets, yeah.
Wow, I think that might be like in the other room coming through my door. So this little cheap microphone is pretty good. Yeah, I can hear them better when I take it out. We're just adding a nature background to Environmental Congress. Okay, Liz, let me know when everybody's finished coming through the virtual door.
You will find coffee on your left. The bathrooms are on the right.
It's slowed down a little, Jen. Why don't you could go ahead and start.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you here this evening with us at our 47th Annual Environmental Congress and our first ever virtual Environmental Congress. And so I am Jennifer Coffey. I'm the Executive Director of ANJAC, the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions. And there we go. Now my slides are scrolling. So welcome to our legislative update session. It's great to have all of you with us. We miss you all being in person, but we are very glad to be able to hold this programming safely and to have everyone together to continue our education and our activism. We have some really fantastic updates, some of which you know, some of which are emerging on the horizon. So we will be tweeting at our handle at ANJAC Tweets. That's us on Twitter. Hashtag EnviroCongress is what we're using to chat about this year's Environmental Congress throughout the month of October. So just a few housekeeping notes. If you've been with us on some of our earlier sessions this month, you know this. Please type your questions in the Q&A option at the bottom of the screen. So if you take your cursor and scroll over the bottom of your screen, you should have a Q&A option that pops up. So you can go ahead and type your questions there. We have a number of ANJAC staff on this evening. I'm sure you know many of them. So they'll be answering questions live. If you have any technical questions, go ahead and post them there. If you can't figure out how to hear somebody or to change your screen view, you can go ahead and ask those questions and we'll do our best to address them there. If you're having severe technical problems and you really just can't figure it out and you're super excited about learning about the legislative updates and you don't want to miss it, go ahead and call Elizabeth Ritter. She's our Deputy Director. That's her cell phone number there. So, and she'll help you troubleshoot with Zoom and get you to where you need to be tonight. If you happen to miss something that was said this evening, or as I know you will, you'll find the program so riveting that you want to share it with all of your fellow environmental commissioners. I want to let you know that all the sessions are being recorded and we will post them at a later date at ANJAC's YouTube channel. So we'll be sending a link out to all the Environmental Congress registrants so you can catch up on either some of the sessions you missed or rewatch some of the ones so that you can become re-familiar with some of the topics that were discussed. With that, I want to thank our very generous and stalwart sponsors of Environmental Congress. We have some wonderful corporate sponsors who work to protect and restore New Jersey's environment and really have been there to make this program of Environmental Congress possible, not just this year, but for many, many years in the past. This year being what it is and being a particular challenge financially, as well as many of the other challenges that 2020 has placed in front of us, made us a little nervous about being able to bring Congress to you this year and to convert the programming. So we thank our corporate sponsors immensely for showing up and being there for us and for you to be able to bring this here to you this evening and all throughout the month of October. I also want to give a hearty thanks to our nonprofit sponsors and to our foundations that provide support to ANJAC. These are our best and brightest partners that we work with throughout the year in coalitions to protect and restore New Jersey's environment, to protect public health, and to achieve some of the fantastic successes that we're able to report to you tonight and that which we have on the horizon for the new year. Yes, we're already starting to talk about the new year, even though it feels like so much still. And this is ANJAC. This is what we look like these days, coming to you from home, from our dining rooms, from our home offices, with our fuzzies, our kitties, our puppies, our laptops. And so you know how to reach us. info@anjac.org is the best email. That's a general email, and we staff that ardently. So you can go ahead and email info@anjac.org with questions, concerns. You can reach out to us individually. You can also reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll be sure to respond to you. We are decentralized these days, staying safe, but we are really proud to be working with environmental commissioners throughout the state. I did a little tallying the other day for a report I was working on and found that no less than 1,000 of you environmental commissioners and municipal officials have attended workshops way back in the before times when we had them in January and February, but mostly our webinars. So we've had 1,000 attendees this year, and we want to thank you for staying engaged, for engaging with your local government, engaging with your state government, and continuing to make sure that the environmental crises that face us here in New Jersey don't take a backseat to the oh so many other crises that have emerged in 2020. So one word before I give up the mic is plastics. And many of you have seen me say this before, and I cannot say enough to thank you, all of you environmental commission members, all of you municipal officials who are with us tonight, for passing 130 local ordinances to reduce plastic pollution, to ban single-use plastic. And because of you, because of your action, New Jersey diverted 400 million. I always have to pause and think about that number for a second and think, is that right? 400 million single-use plastic bags avoided annually, just from the local ordinances that you have passed. And now I say just from, knowing the enormous amount of work that you put into those ordinances. And they were all passed within the last 2 years. When I spoke to you at Environmental Congress at the end of 2018, we had 2 ordinances on the books in New Jersey, 130 as of today. Unfortunately, I cannot yet report to you that Governor Murphy has signed one of the biggest pieces of legislation, at least in my mind, that has passed this year, the strongest plastic pollution reduction act in the country. So New Jersey's law gets to banning plastic bags with some exceptions for sanitary uses, paper bags for climate change reasons, because paper bags take an enormous amount of energy and water to produce. It bans polystyrene food containers, so those styrofoam food containers, styrofoam coffee cups, and makes plastic straws in bars and restaurants when we are in a bar and restaurant upon request only. By our math, Governor Murphy has until November 8th, which I believe is a Sunday, so it might be the 9th, to act on this bill. And so we'd like to encourage you to call his office. We know sometimes this number is a little bit wonky and the messages are full and they may not pick up. Please keep trying. 609-292-6000. and ask Governor Murphy to sign the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act into law. We know from talking with the governor's policy people that the polystyrene industry was lobbying the governor's office very, very hard. They are very unhappy with this bill. They were also very unhappy when Vermont and Maryland and Massachusetts and Hawaii and Portland and Seattle and took action to ban polystyrene. Now, New Jersey being what we are, we one-upped and addressed plastic bags, paper bags, straws, and polystyrene all at once. But given we're the most densely populated state in the nation, this is a big hit to them in their pocketbook. And so they're not happy with this bill, and we need to make sure that Governor Murphy continues to hear from you to say you want this law signed in its entirety. So thank you in advance for doing that. I also want to encourage you, because I can't possibly let the night go by without encouraging you to vote. Voter registration deadlines are passed in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I'm not sure about New York, but we can find out that information and maybe post it in the chat for you. If you need information on your polling location, if you want to check if you've already mailed your ballot, that it's been received, there's all kinds of great information at nj.gov/state/elections. Or you can just Google voting in New Jersey. This graphic is from the League of Women Voters, and they have some wonderful information about voting this year in New Jersey. Voting's a little different this year. So you can vote by mail and you can vote by ballot box. If you are using one of those county ballot boxes, I want to make sure that everybody knows that you need to place your ballot in a county ballot box in the county in which you are voting. So I vote in Mercer County, so I placed it in a ballot box down the street from me, which is in Mercer County. I couldn't go to the grocery store that I usually go to, which is in another county, and look for a ballot box over there. So that's a no-no. Make sure you put your ballot in a ballot box or in a USPS box, or drop it off at a post office nearest you. So any post office, but a county ballot box in your county. I also want to thank you all for being here tonight, and ANJAC supporters are incredibly generous with your time, with your actions, with your emails, with your shares on social media, and also with your gifts. All of the gifts that you donate to us support us to support you. So it's a little bit of a Jerry Maguire thing, help us help you. We have a recurring gift or a monthly gift program now. And the small dollar donations really help keep us going. So those $10, $15, $20, $25 donations a month really help us to be able to continue our small grants programs to environmental commissions, to continue our social media posts, to continue our work in Trenton, which really is mostly virtual these days, but we've been, as you'll hear, pretty much killing it this year with quite a few pieces of legislations passed. With the support of our partner organization. So anything that you can give to us, we steward that money very carefully and with a lot of conscious effort. And so we appreciate your donations and your dollars. We know there are a lot of competing needs this year, but anything you give to us, we really appreciate. With that said, welcome this evening to our New Jersey Legislative Update. I am very excited. You have some wonderful speakers here this evening who are all incredibly active on a variety of statewide issues on clean energy, plastic pollution, flooding, climate change, and. So you're going to have a very dynamic session tonight. Not to be outdone by tomorrow's session, I invite you to come back tomorrow at noon to talk exclusively about clean energy projects, where we will have Montclair Sustainability Officer and EC member, Kelly Moy from the Board of Public Utilities, and Sean LaTourette from the DEP, talking about what the state and local are doing and what they're doing in partnership to advance clean energy in New Jersey. And then I want to invite you to come back a week from this evening and join us and Deputy Commissioner Olivia Glenn from the DEP to talk about environmental justice advancements at the DEP and also the new environmental justice legislation. We also just got confirmation from, and we'll be having Dr. Nikki Sheets from the Environmental Justice Alliance join us as well and tell us why this new environmental justice legislation, which is the strongest in the nation, is so important to Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities who have long been overburdened by pollution. And then it wouldn't be Congress without a little networking. So we've got a great networking session planned for you on October 30th. So come, wear your black and your orange and your Halloween pins and let's have some fun and some networking and chat about some goal setting and challenges we've had during the pandemic and workshop those problems out together. So it is just a great pleasure to have all of you here with us. The holidays are coming up. Yes, it still feels like summer to me here, but they're coming. So we have a fundraiser planned on November 13th. We'd like to invite you to join us to hear from a brewery, a distillery, and a vineyard in New Jersey. We've chosen to partner with these businesses not only because they've got products we may be interested in supporting as the holidays approach, but also because they have done some wonders in terms of their environmental stewardship in water conservation, stormwater management, carbon sequestration, and they're wonderful community actors as well. So we hope that you'll be able to join us for that the week or so before Thanksgiving. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. I'm going to bop over to another meeting with the DEP. We have wonderful ANJAC folks here tonight: Elizabeth Ritter, Julie Groth, Cheryl Reardon, of course, Alex Ambrose, and our guest speakers, Henry Guida and Tom Gilbert. And so I bid you a good evening, and I look forward to seeing all of you very soon.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank
All right.
you.
So thank you everyone for being here tonight. Like we said, we are very excited to do this new format for our Environmental Congress. I'm going to begin sharing my screen, and we are just going to dive right into it. So as Jen said, we have 3 wonderful speakers. I'm a little biased, but the first speaker will be me. I'm Alex Ambrose. I'm the Policy Associate at ANJAC. I will be talking about single-use plastics legislation, the new stormwater rules, and how water and NJ Pact, which is the protecting against climate threats, how those interact. Next, we will have my good friend Henry Guida from New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. He'll be talking about energy efficiency, electricity, or electric vehicles and transportation, environmental justice and cumulative impacts, and neonics and pesticides. I'm very interested to see if Henry can correctly pronounce neonicotinoids. And wrapping it all up will be Tom Gilbert from New Jersey Conservation Foundation. He'll be talking about pipelines, clean energy and solar, the Global Warming Response Act, and how energy and NJ Pact, the protecting against climate threats, how those interact. Finally, we will be holding all of our questions until the end. Please feel free if you have questions along the way. As Jen said, you can type them, just move your mouse, and you have a little Q&A box on the bottom. Please type them as they come up, and then we will address all of them at the end, just to make sure we all have time to speak. So Jen stole a little bit of my thunder, but I don't think anyone will be upset to hear about it a little bit more. The Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. So she didn't really get too much into the backstory of this. Some of you may have heard this already, but back in, 2018, Governor Murphy vetoed an industry-backed bill that was, it was not strong enough at all. It was only a 5-cent fee on plastic bags. There were a whole bunch of not so great provisions. Jen loves to tell the story that she then went to Senator Smith, who is chair of the Senate Environment Committee, and he said, "You're going to have to do this the hard way. You aren't going to see any legislation for a very long time. You're going to have to go back and get all the municipalities to start doing local ordinances." And that was when Jen turned around to all of you, our wonderful EEC members, and said, "Let's get to work." Not even a year and a half later, we had a great bill called the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. It passed the previous session in the Senate. This session, it passed in both the Senate and the Assembly with bipartisan support, which is amazing. So we got to prove Senator Smith wrong that there was enough support and we could get a bill through. Now, what does this bill do? It bans all single-use carry-out plastic bags, and it reduces paper bags. So small businesses that are under 2,500 square feet are exempt. They are allowed to still provide paper bags. That way places in more urban areas will still be allowed to provide paper bags free of charge. The reason it's important to do something on paper bags is that we have learned from previous plastic policies that when you ban plastic bags, paper bag usage goes up. And right now in New Jersey, we use about 1,300 football fields of trees every year just to sustain our current paper bag usage. So imagine if we ban plastic bags, how much that would go up. And we all know forests are incredibly important for climate change, as well as a host of other ecosystem resources. It bans polystyrene food containers, which is amazing. So those clamshells that you have that are made of styrofoam that you feel terrible throwing out because you can't recycle them because they are dirty polystyrene, those will be gone as well. It also reduces single-use plastic straws. They will be available by request only, so folks with disabilities will not have to prove their disability in order to get a straw. It creates a fund for municipalities that comes out of the Clean Communities Fund. That money is earmarked specifically for education initiatives, outreach initiatives about this, and purchasing of reusable bags to pass those out. It creates an advisory council that will keep track of how this bill is going. It will provide feedback based on how it's going in restaurants, how it's going in businesses. And the good news is your ordinance will stay in effect until implementation. So as Jen said, this bill isn't signed into law yet. However, a lot of this goes into, once the bill is signed, it's about 18 months until a lot of this goes into effect. If you have an ordinance in your town, that will stay into effect until that 18 months. However, as Jen said, we still are waiting for the governor to sign it. So we are doing our due diligence, making sure that the governor knows how much support this bill has. But as Jen said, call that number. There was also a petition link on ANJAC's social media where you can go and add your name and tell the governor to sign this bill into law. This is how I picture it in my mind of us ANJAC staff at the signing. Another new and exciting bill is the recycled content bill. It's also called manufacturer responsibility. It's sometimes called extended producer responsibility, or EPR. It is based heavily on California's bill. So we're copying off California a little bit here. All of this is actually brand new, like breaking, just happened Monday morning. That's when I went back and revised this slide. Senator Smith, again, chairman of the Senate Environment Committee, made this recycled content bill that requires a certain percentage of the plastic, glass, paper, any kind of those containers in New Jersey. A certain percentage of that has to come from recycled content. So it can't be what's called virgin plastic. It has to be recycled. So this bill sets a certain standard for recycled content. Most of them, it's around 35 to 25%. And then that increases every 3 years until it's capped at 50%, which is amazing. That includes rigid plastic containers, drink containers, those plastic soda bottles, glass containers, and carryout bags. It also bans polystyrene loose fill packaging, also known as packing peanuts, also known as my cat's favorite toy, and therefore my least favorite toy. I think we all know what a nightmare packing peanuts can be. There are so many better alternatives, so the fact that those will be banned in New Jersey is amazing. However, just keep in mind that recycling is not going to solve our plastic pollution problem. We really need that ban on plastic in order to really make a dent in our plastic pollution problem. I'm going to take a quick drink. All right, so let's talk about everyone's favorite subject, the state budget. So the state budget was a little weird this year, as most things were. Usually the state budget goes from July 1st of one year until June 30th of the next year. So that's considered the fiscal year. The fiscal year for 2021, they extended it or for 2020, they extended it so that the new fiscal year was going to start October 1st. So again, this all kind of just happened in the last few weeks. The proposed budget that came out in around September of 2020 took 50% of the Clean Communities Fund and 50% of the State Recycling Fund and used that to fund parks maintenance. So it was, as we like to say, kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. You are essentially robbing all of these programs of the full funding that they deserve. This is an amazing success story because at our urging, the legislature actually fixed this. And in the final budget that the governor signed, that the legislature proposed, it included full funding for all 3 programs. So the Clean Communities Fund, I mentioned that before, that's used in local municipalities get some small grants. They're usually in the thousands of dollars to fund cleanups, park cleanups, beach cleanups, river cleanups, purchase reusable bags, anything that helps cut down on litter. The State Recycling Fund is used to obviously help with your local recycling, and then parks maintenance is used to help maintain state parks. All 3 of those became even more essential during this pandemic. So that's how we were able to tell the legislature, really all 3 of these should be fully funded. So that's another amazing win that we had this year. And then a new stormwater ordinance came out. So the new stormwater rules came out of New Jersey DEP in March of this year, which feels like ages ago. These new stormwater rules mean that every municipality needs to update their local stormwater ordinance. That ordinance must be enacted by March 2nd of 2021. And what the biggest change in these new rules is that they require green infrastructure. So municipalities, developers, you are now required to use green infrastructure, such as something that you see here. This is a rain garden. You are required to use that to meet the water goals in stormwater. So that's water quality, water quantity, and groundwater recharge. Now DEP's ordinance is pretty good, but you know us here at ANJAC, we're never just okay with pretty good. So we are currently working on an enhanced model ordinance for municipalities to use in place of that to update their stormwater ordinance, just to make it a little bit stronger to ensure that your water is as good as it can get. Now, stormwater and climate change. So I talked a little bit about NJ Pact. So that's a new initiative from the governor, and it stands for Protecting Against Climate Threats. This is a really exciting initiative because it is meant to encompass all environmental sections of the DEP and the BPU, many parts of the administration. So it's not just like one new rule, it's going to completely transform all of the rules if we do it well. So there's a new round of stormwater rules that we're working on now. Don't worry, they're not going to be out for a while. However, the old stormwater rules, one of the problems was that they used rainfall data from, let's say, the past 100 years. So 1910 to 2010. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a feeling that in 1930, rainfall probably wasn't as bad as it has been the last few years. So what DEP is actually doing is they're going to use these rainfall projection data that they found mostly in North Jersey. There's a whole bunch of monitoring stations that they have up there to predict how much rainfall we're going to have in the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And they're going to use those to write the new rules. They predict that there's an increase of rainfall of over 30% by the year 2050. That means that where we're building things now, a lot of those things may not be on land by the year 2050. So we have to start planning for that now. This is a really exciting change that we asked the DEP to consider, and they are moving forward with. And I know we talk about rising ocean levels a lot, hence the corgi. However, inland flooding is a huge problem as well, as I'm sure many of you know. This is a photo that I don't think Jen took, but I think she found. This is Route 1 after Hurricane Irene in August of 2011. As you can see, that is a bridge and that is a regular street light with the Route 1 sign on it. So that's a lot of flooding. Now, Route 1 is by no stretch near the ocean. So it's not just coastal flooding we have to worry about, it's also inland flooding. And that's it for me. So thank you. As Jen said, you can follow us at Anjac Tweets and Anjac on Facebook. That's where you're going to find updates on, like I said, the plastics legislation. We only have about a week and a half or 2.5 weeks until the governor's deadline to sign that bill. So follow us, and I promise you guys will be the first to know as soon as we get news about that. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to pass it over to my good friend, Henry Joseph Gaida.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. That was a great overview. So just give me 1 second so I can get my screen up. Alex or Tom, if either of you can just give me a thumbs up that my screen is good. Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Good evening, everyone. My name is Henry Gaida. I am the policy director with the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. Before I begin, I do just want to give a very special thank you and shout out to our really great partners at Anjac. They do some really incredible and fantastic work, not only as just a partner organization, but I prior to about 2 months ago, was an environmental commissioner. I was an EC member in Brick, New Jersey, in Ocean County, for about 2 years prior to me moving out of state. But I still like to be involved in any way I can. My entire family and parents still live in Brick, so it's really great to continue to help out or be involved in any way that I can. But nonetheless, thank you all for the time here today. I'm going to walk us through a discussion of a few topics today, specifically as it relates to ongoing pieces of legislation that are moving through or have moved through Trenton, what they mean for the environment and what it means for all of us. And so before we get there, I'm just going to give a quick background of who we are. So New Jersey LCV is actually two organizations. We have our education fund and our normal, just New Jersey LCV. Our education fund for all of our tax experts is a C3 organization. So this is where we do a lot of our educational work. This is where we do our civic engagement type of work. This is where we focus on a lot of educational programs. So New Jersey LCV Education Fund runs an educational program on stormwater management. All of our work for that program is based out of our C3. It's predicated on capacity building, working with local municipalities. Maybe some of you are on the line, I'm not sure. But working with local municipalities to look at issues as it relates to stormwater management, improving water quality, improving the quality of life for residents throughout our state. And so that's really the basis for our C3. We also do a pretty significant amount of voter education, voter engagement, things like that. Ultimately, we are the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. We definitely like to ensure that people are aware of environmental issues in their area as it relates to the ballot. And then in addition, our C4, that's really where we do all of our policy and legislative and political work. New Jersey LCV does consider itself the political voice for the environment. We do a lot of work to elect pro-conservation representatives to state and local offices that are committed to protecting our natural resources, safeguarding our clean water and clean air, and ultimately being really strong champions and stewards for natural resources throughout the state. And so that's just a little bit about us. You can obviously find more about it on our website, but if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out and to move forward. So first off, as I just mentioned, New Jersey LCV is the political voice for the environment in New Jersey. We don't get there just by being one organization. So we actually work with a number of organizations, specifically Anjac, and you're going to hear from Tom in a moment at New Jersey Conservation Foundation. And so we don't create our priorities on our own. And so what that means is we bring all of our partners into a room and we hash out, what are the things that we want to accomplish year over year? What are our long-term goals and our short-term goals, and how can we get there? And so one of the ways that we do that is by creating the common agenda for the environment. So our most recent agenda, these agendas follow the cycle of legislative sessions because this is legislative based. This common agenda for the environment was put together last year. It included over 25 of our partners, 450 of our members, and we were able to culminate all of the ideas surrounding environmental action throughout the state into what we think to be pretty succinct categories. And I'm going to walk through a few of these in the next slides. But ultimately, just to hit on one more point, we really think this represents a really strong cross-section of what environmental action looks like in our state. Over the last few years, since the change in administrations, the environment and environmental action has really been a whirlwind of a change as compared to previous administration. New Jersey has really established itself on a lot of really incredible things, such as clean energy, climate action, environmental justice action, plastics. And so we really have a lot of really good advocates, both on this call with all of you to thank for a lot of those successes. But we're really pleased to see that a lot of our agenda items that we've laid out over the last few years have all come to fruition. And so to bring us to our first category, it's to achieve our 100% clean energy future. There are a few topics in this category, one specifically being increasing our clean energy goals to 100% by 2050. I'm not going to talk too much about that today. I think Tom might touch on it a little bit, but there's something a little more wonky that's buried within this priority, and it's updating appliance efficiency standards. So I know it might not be the sexiest thing in the world to hear these 4 words in a row, but one thing is for sure, updating efficiency standards is widely considered the best water, climate, and energy policy you've never heard of. And essentially just because it has a major impact for something that really doesn't take much cultural change at all. And so essentially just the way it works is, I'm sure most of us are familiar with Energy Star products. Energy Star products generally represent the cream of the crop of appliances and products based on efficiency. Appliance standards do something similar. They work on ensuring that products are more energy efficient, but they do that by removing the least efficient products from the market. And so it essentially just raises the floor for what products can be bought or sold. We're seeing action on updating our efficiency standards happen throughout the country. And ultimately, if standards are updated in states around New Jersey, then there is the threat of New Jersey becoming a dumping ground for more inefficient appliances. And that would be bad for all of us. It could actually increase our rates, especially for those in our state who suffer from the highest energy burdens, who pay the most of their income on their utility bills. And so, that's not something we want to see. There's also big impacts for commercial properties, businesses, and things like that. And so that's something we're trying to avoid. And the benefits that can be achieved by New Jersey are pretty significant. There's a bill that we're working on right now with some partners of ours, including New Jersey Conservation Foundation and some members of the legislature. We're working on bill text. And just to give a brief update of what it would mean for New Jersey in terms of savings, it's significant. It's pretty crazy, actually. So if we were to adopt updated standards in 2019, by 2025, we would achieve $176 million in ratepayer savings per year. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of money back in people's pockets. And it's one of the things that we can do right now that just like, general efficiency, where energy efficiency projects generally require upfront investment. This is something that doesn't typically, that doesn't happen. Most of the products that we're working on don't have an increased upfront cost. And that's just because the products that we're working with have already received about 50% of the market share. So they're, widely bought and sold, and there's really no impact to consumers. And so that's something that's really great. And that's something that we like to see. In addition, other savings that we can see include a significant amount of electricity that's equivalent to the annual usage of 64,000 New Jersey homes. That's a crazy statistic. It's the same amount of water as about 74,000 New Jersey homes. And each year we can see savings equivalent to the emissions of 69,000 cars. And so this is something in the short term that we can see having a very big impact. But to move forward, this is also a really huge impact piece of legislation that we worked on, and it's called the EV bill. So for those who don't know, the largest greenhouse gas emitting sector in New Jersey is the transportation sector. It's about 45 to 48% of our total emissions. And in addition, it is a primary contributor to the localized air pollution that we see in our urban centers and environmental justice communities. And that's particularly from the smog created by diesel exhaust and other vehicles that are driving through. I'm sure we've all had the experience of being behind a garbage truck or a school bus, and once it tries to accelerate, you get that mouthful of that metallic-y smog taste. No one really enjoys that. And so that's something that we're trying to get rid of ultimately. And in January, we had an incredible success. So New Jersey LCV with our partners were able to get the EV bill on a bipartisan basis signed into law by Governor Murphy. This bill did a few things. One, it set New Jersey Transit on a path to nearly electrify its entire bus fleet by 2040. New Jersey Transit is the third largest MTA in the country, so that's a really big deal. I'm just gonna take a quick sip of water. In addition, it encourages people to purchase EVs because the best thing that we can do right now, the most cost-effective and efficient way to reduce our emissions in the short term are to change our driving habits from conventional combustion engines to EVs. And so mile per mile, an EV is 69 to 79% cleaner than a conventional combustion engine. And so the benefits are really stark, that they're really clear. And so this bill established a rebate program up to $5,000 per plug-in electric vehicle. So, you can go to a store, depending on the mileage of your vehicle, you can get up to $5,000 right off the top. That's super exciting. That's really great. And then lastly, this bill also sets up a really incredible framework for fast charging networks throughout specific traveled hotspots throughout our state. So, if you're driving down south on the turnpike, you can go to a rest stop and there should be charging stations. If you're driving from Lake Pacong all the way down to the shore by where I'm from, on your way through the Garden State Parkway or 287 or whatever roads you take, there would be electric charging stations there to ensure that you can get from one place to another. And so in addition, this bill isn't the only thing that will help reduce air pollution and get people driving in electric vehicles. There are other obvious issues with expanding EVs. Some people live in community associations where, maybe you have a condo and you live in a complex. It's hard to own charging stations there. And so there has been some legislation that's been signed into law to reduce burdens and ensure that people can have easy access to charging infrastructure wherever they live. In addition, ensuring that some houses, if they're going to be built, can be charger ready. It's just ensuring that the proper electrical systems can be in the house before someone buys it if it's a new residential home. And so, there are obviously other complementary policies that can be put in place to reduce emissions from our transportation sector. But this is where we are right now. And this year, as I said, we had a really great success back in January. So to move to the next slide. So our third priority was to reduce pollution in environmental justice communities. And the primary way that we were seeking to do this was through passing the environmental justice or cumulative impacts bill. New Jersey LCV did not lead on this piece of legislation. We really have to give all credit to our partners at the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, Ironbound Community Corporation, and Clean Water Action. They did an incredible job of getting this bill, which was very, very challenging, through the legislature and ultimately signed into law. It was over a decade in the making. And so If you do have specific questions, I am very happy to put you in contact with these organizations to answer. But ultimately, this is the first statewide comprehensive policy that addresses overburdened communities and pollution loads on specific census blocks and ensures that everyone actually does in fact have a right to clean air and clean water. And I'm going to move quickly to the next. And so our fourth priority was to protect our clean water through chemical safety reform. It's a bit of a wonky title, but ultimately what we're trying to do here are reduce the ambient concentrations of specific pesticides that have really significant consequences to our pollinator species throughout our state. And one way we're trying to do that is by making neonics, or neonicotinoids, I think I said that right, Alex, a restricted use pesticide. So this is something that other states have done, like Maryland, I believe Connecticut, Canada's trying to do it, the whole EU has done either this level of regulation or have completely banned. And so what this means is simply, in New Jersey, if you're not a licensed applicator, you can't use this pesticide. And really, there's a limited scope on what this pesticide would be able to be used for. It does not affect our agriculture or our farmers in New Jersey. Through a lot of data, we actually see that farming and agriculture isn't the issue in New Jersey. The real issue are uninformed consumers who are going to a store, buying this product, not really understanding the directions of how to apply it, and just completely abusing the product, using concentrations that are way higher than what they need to be using. And so we actually find that in studies conducted by the EPA of ambient neonic pollution throughout New Jersey, about 40% of statewide samples came back with elevated neonic concentrations, but in Bergen County, it was 90% of samples came back with elevated neonic levels. And so I believe there's only one farm in Bergen County. Bergen County is, it's got a lot of residences, it's pretty urban. And so, we can really see that it's people, or the problem is people using this product on their lawns, or their gardens and things like that. And so this is a really smart, pragmatic first step to reducing this pesticide. And we know that it has a huge impact specifically on our honeybee population and other bees. We're seeing in some years colony decline of nearly 40% in some cases. And that's, not just in other states, but it's actually happening here in New Jersey. Honeybees and other pollinators are huge economic drivers in terms of pollinating crops. The big things New Jersey's famous for, like our tomatoes, our blueberries, are all pollinated by bees. And so we need our pollinating species, and this is a really smart way where we can protect them. This bill has passed the Senate in a strongly bipartisan fashion. It's due up in the Assembly floor, hopefully in the next upcoming weeks, and we're going to be urging Governor Murphy to sign it once it is passed. And so that's all I have today. I don't want to talk too much about the slide because I believe Tom's going to mention it, but ultimately, I will just quickly mention that we have a very new call to action in New Jersey. Just a few days ago, the DEP released this report, New Jersey's Global Warming Response Act 80 by 50. And frankly, it said with a lot of transparency that we don't have the policy measures in place to meet our decarbonization goals. And so as advocates, my organization and ANJAC, and New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and all of you, especially on a local level, we have the power to really envision ambitious, pragmatic policies where we can achieve our goals. And so if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Happy to talk. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Henry. Congratulations on your pronunciation of neonicotinoids. That was very impressive.
Thanks. I tried.
All right, great. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to, last but certainly not least, Tom Gilbert, who is the Campaign Director for Energy, Climate, and Natural Resources for New Jersey Conservation Foundation.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for getting through my too long title. I will share my screen. I guess can I do that? Go ahead and do that now. Okay. Let me try this. Good. Okay. Well, first I want to thank ANJAC very much for inviting me to be part of this panel, and thank both ANJAC and Henry and LCV for being such great partners with us on so many issues. I am going to try to give you a quick whirl through the incredible amount of activity that is happening right now when it comes to energy and climate policy. It is, I think, both a daunting and exciting time to be working on these issues right now. Let me just say first a word about Rethink Energy New Jersey, which is a campaign that we launched about 5 years ago, along with the Pinelands Preservation Alliance and Watershed Institute, working with the goal of transitioning New Jersey away from fossil fuels to clean, renewable sources of energy that are appropriately, they're cited in an environmentally sound manner. And little did we know what a whirlwind of activity there would be on those issues since we formed that campaign. I'm going to try to advance my slide, and I'm having difficulty doing that. Oh, there we go. Okay. So first, I want to start out with I guess, some of the threats when it comes to energy. So New Jersey already has 5 major interstate gas pipelines and over 1,500 miles of pipelines crisscrossing the state. And one of the challenges that we've all been dealing with over the past 5 years in particular are just numerous proposed fossil fuel infrastructure projects. And these are projects that very typically are targeted to run through preserved lands, sensitive natural resources, and pose a risk to communities, both rural and urban. And they're really at odds with the clean energy future that we need to be investing in. So just to highlight a few, there's the proposed PennEast gas pipeline, which I'm going to come back to in a moment and speak a bit about. There is the Northeast Supply Enhancement Project, a pipeline that was slated to run under Raritan Bay and bring gas to New York City. Good news on that one. It's thanks to tremendous opposition from numerous organizations. It has been stopped after both the New Jersey DEP and the New York State DEC denied environmental permits for the project after a multi-year battle. There are 2 pipelines that have been threatening the Pinelands National Reserve, the Southern Reliability Link, which is a New Jersey natural gas project, and the South Jersey Gas Pipeline. There's been actually good news on the South Jersey Gas Pipeline, again, after opposition from many organizations. That project was stopped when the BL England power plant, which the pipeline was slated to bring gas to, scrapped their plans to convert that plant from oil and coal to gas because it was no longer needed for electric supply. So good news there, and I'm going to come back to where things stand on the Southern Reliability Link in a moment. Another very controversial proposal is the proposal for a liquefied natural gas LNG terminal in Gibbstown on the Delaware Bay. Again, there's been a lot of opposition to that project. The status on that one is that, somewhat surprisingly, at the last meeting of the Delaware River Basin Commission, the commission voted to slow down their consideration of the project, which really had been on a fast track, and to take additional time to really look at the, really go through the detailed analysis of the particulars of that project, which is an encouraging sign, but it's definitely not the end of it. And I know opponents are watching closely to see what happens at the next DRBC meeting on December 9th. And then there have been numerous gas power plant proposals. Very controversial plant that had been proposed in the Meadowlands that had again been the focus of really intense opposition and was scrapped. And then some very good news just last night: the proposed New Jersey Transit gas plant they were considering for reliability for the New Jersey transit system. New Jersey Transit just last night put that on the shelf and is instead putting out an RFP for experts to help them consider how to design a microgrid powered by renewables as an alternative. So, so there've been some very good victories here in kind of stopping the build out of fossil fuel infrastructure that in many cases is not needed, threatening natural resources and communities, and just really inconsistent with investment we need to make in a clean energy future. So just to say a little bit more about the PennEast Pipeline project, which we've been very heavily involved with for the past 5 years. So that did get approval from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in early 2018. And with that FERC approval, the company was able then to go to court and condemn over 130 properties in New Jersey, including 42 preserved lands preserved by the state and other partners. Fortunately, New Jersey's Attorney General appealed the lower court granting of eminent domain with respect to the state preserved lands, and won an appeal in the Third Circuit. Under the Constitution, a claim of state sovereign immunity, whereby states are shielded from being sued in federal court under that clause of the Constitution. And the court ruled in favor of the state, and so the company lost the authority to condemn those preserved lands and thus couldn't move forward with the project. So it really stopped the project in its tracks. Shortly after that, the DEP denied permits for the project based on the Third Circuit decision. The company did turn around and petition the US Supreme Court to hear that case. And at this point, we have not yet heard any kind of decision out of the Supreme Court as to whether they will take that case up or not. They have asked the U.S. Solicitor General's office to weigh in on the matter. So that's pending, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds, of course, with all of the big controversy surrounding the Supreme Court right now, complicating matters further. But it's worth noting that even if they were successful in overturning that decision, they would still have to come back to New Jersey DEP and also to the Delaware River Basin Commission to get permits for the project before they could proceed. The SRL pipeline, the Southern Reliability Link, this is a New Jersey natural gas project that a significant portion of which cuts through the Pinelands. Construction on that project is well underway, despite the fact that there are legal appeals pending over the BPU and the Pinelands Commission approvals of the project. But the most recent development is that during construction of the pipeline, there were numerous spills that occurred as a result of horizontal directional drilling, which has become a pretty common pipeline construction technique where they kind of bore under bedrock, in order to avoid streams and other resources. Well, unfortunately, what happened is there were what they call inadvertent returns, and where the drilling mud spoils wind up in places they're not intended to go. And this poor woman in Upper Freehold had the foundation of her home damaged so severely that she was told to evacuate. She had 5 minutes to get her things and get out of the house. And numerous nearby streams were polluted with the drilling spoils as well. After that, the DEP suspended permits for the project and is requiring the company to go back and do a very detailed geotechnical and other analyses to determine whether the remainder of the project can be constructed safely. So this highlights a big problem with many of these pipeline projects. The PennEast Pipeline would rely on horizontal directional drilling to bore under numerous C1 waterways. And what we've learned is that this horizontal directional drilling typically has about a 50% failure rate, and that comes from gas industry studies. And we've seen some very significant examples of HDD spills such as this one in sensitive wetlands in Ohio during construction of the Rover pipeline, and the construction of the Mariner East 2 pipeline in Pennsylvania has been an absolute horror show with multiple spills, many which have ruined people's wells. So this is an issue that we and others are encouraging the DEP to take a hard look at and strengthen their regulations with respect to horizontal directional drilling. So now let's turn to some of the exciting things that are happening on clean energy in New Jersey. The first that I would highlight is in 2018, numerous organizations partnered together to pass the Clean Energy Law, which really began to transform New Jersey's energy policies in a very comprehensive way to move to a clean energy future. So you can see some of the major policy elements of that bill. Since that time, many of these issues have been moving forward at the Board of Public Utilities, offshore wind in particular. The BPU has already done a first solicitation for 1.1 gigawatts, which was awarded to Ørsted, and they recently issued a second RFP for 2.4 gigawatts to fill that first 3.5 gigawatts of offshore wind called for under the Act. There's some exciting things happening on energy efficiency right now. There are 6 energy efficiency filings right now before the BPU from regulated gas and electric utilities in New Jersey, representing about $600 million in investment that's designed to meet the energy efficiency targets under the Act. And there's been a whirlwind of activity on solar. There's been development of a sunset of the SREC program, a development of a transitional program, and then the wheels are in motion to create a successor to the SREC program, and also a community solar pilot program that's now in its second year and had a very successful first year, helping to bring solar to communities that haven't enjoyed the same ability to access solar. So a lot of exciting things happening. And all of these new policies on solar have brought solar siting issues to the fore, and there's still some challenges there that need to be addressed. That new community solar program that I mentioned really emphasized projects on rooftops and brownfields and landfills and parking lots. In fact, all the projects in the first year of the program were those types of projects rather than projects on farmland or forests that are de-emphasized under that program. However, there is a new legislative proposal, S2605, that would create a new utility scale solar program, and these are the much larger kind of grid scale projects that have been more prevalent in other states. We haven't seen as many of these kind of large scale grid supply projects in New Jersey, and this is intending to incentivize those, which is a good thing, but we need to make sure that they're cited, they're well cited. And the bill, as it came out of the Senate Environment Committee, included some protections for forests in the highlands and the pinelands, but in our perspective, it needs to go further. Needs further amendments to prevent large-scale clearing of forest outside of the highlands and the pinelands for solar development, and also to prevent putting solar on our best farmland, our best soils, those lands that are prioritized for preservation by the state and by the counties. And just as an example of this, we're dealing with a proposed over 800-acre solar utility-scale solar project in Salem County. And the property is it's 85% prime soils, the best soils in the state. There's 2 C1 streams that border the property that have habitat for active bog turtle population. So it's really kind of a poster child of bad siting. And so we need further policies in the state that can steer solar to more marginal open lands, and that can help us achieve our solar targets without conflicting with our critical open space and natural resource protection goals. And that's exactly the language that the Energy Master Plan employs and suggests, is that focus on identifying marginal lands for solar development. And so that brings me to the Energy Master Plan, which was finalized early this year, and really builds upon the clean energy law. In the electric sector, it establishes that goal of 100% clean energy by 2050, and also began to lay out the strategies needed to electrify the building and the transportation sectors as well. And one of the, I think, cutting edge things about the Energy Master Plan is that it was based on what's called the Integrated Energy Plan. It's a very sophisticated model that maps out to 2050 how New Jersey can get to 100% clean energy by ramping up renewables and efficiency and storage and so forth, maintain a reliable electric grid, and here's the kicker, do it at less cost than the current path that we're on. And that's really kind of counter to what a lot of people assume, and oftentimes what you hear from the gas and oil companies. And so we can, not only we can achieve this, we can have a reliable grid, and ultimately it's going to cost less than the path that we're on now. And this brings me to the Global Warming Response Act report. And Henry spoke about this a little bit. I want to provide just a little more detail about what's in there. And so under the Global Warming Response Act, New Jersey has a target to reduce emissions economy-wide 80% from 2006 levels by 2050. And so this report, for the first time, begins to lay out a more detailed roadmap of how we're going to get there. And so by sector, it talks about the emissions reductions that are needed and begins to lay out some of those many sweeping policy changes that are needed that Henry referred to. So for example, you can see in the transportation sector, we need to reduce emissions 87%. One of the real groundbreaking recommendations in there is a policy that by 2035, all new auto sales would be electric vehicle sales only by 2035. And New Jersey would be only the second state after California to have that policy. And then in the building sector, we have to reduce emissions 89%. I mean, these are staggering numbers. And that would be accomplished by transitioning 90% of building heating and water heating to electricity rather than fossil fuels. Again, in the electric sector, the target is 100% net zero emissions from the electric sector, and that's going to require an enormous ramp up of renewables from 3.3 gigawatts today to 16 gigawatts in 2030 to 60 gigawatts in 2050. So we need an enormous development of renewable energy over that time frame. Some new focus on the industrial sector and the waste and ag sector, an emphasis on dealing with short-lived climate pollutants. And so this is a newer requirement under the Global Warming Response Act to deal with these other pollutants like methane and hydrofluorocarbons and black carbon that actually in the short run, in the near term, are even more damaging than CO2. And then lastly, we were very interested to see and pleased to see a focus on increasing carbon sequester across different land types in New Jersey, 33% by 2050, and the call for development of a statewide sequestration plan with targets for 2030 and 2050. So this is, it's an exciting but overwhelming, I think, set of challenges that are going to require all hands on deck. And so I really encourage people to delve into this report and think about what role you and your organization or you personally can play in helping move to this clean energy future. And then lastly, just to say a word about PACT, and Alex mentioned this. Again, this is I think a really important kind of comprehensive initiative that flows out of Executive Order 100 that the governor signed when the Energy Master Plan came out calling on DEP to revise and develop a suite of regulations to protect against climate threats. Alex mentioned some of those with respect to dealing with the impacts of climate change, like rising seas and inland flooding. There's also a series of regulations in development to reduce emissions from electric generating units. And that's a real challenge. How do we do that in a way that doesn't create leakage and just result in emissions increasing elsewhere that then blow back to us? How do we do it in a way that can bring benefits to environmental justice communities as per the new EJ law that Henry referenced? They're looking at regulations to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, and also how to facilitate, expedite approval of renewable energy projects while also protecting and safeguarding natural resources. So this is all happening right now, and this is something, if you're not already paying attention to, I really encourage people to plug in. DEP has a great website here where you can figure out the different pieces of this PACT initiative and get involved. So I'm going to stop there. There's so much that we could talk about under climate and clean energy right now, but I know we want to save a little bit of time for any questions that haven't already been addressed. And I want to encourage people, if you'd like to stay in touch with us on these issues, here's how you can stay in touch with Rethink Energy New Jersey. So I'll stop there, Alex, and see how you want to handle questions.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I just a little plug, I will say I have learned so much, I get so much information from rethinkenergy.org. It is such a great resource if you are interested in learning more about everything that Tom talked about.
Thank you for the plug.
Yeah. So we have a bunch of questions, which is very exciting. So Henry, if you want to come on back on video, I can start going through these questions, and I'll go through the ones that we'll just go in order. And I'll start with mine. So a plastics question: next steps to address numbers 3 through 7, plastics now landfilled, how to encourage creation of reuse conversion technologies in New Jersey, how to address reusable containers for food, and educate on behavior change and redesign food delivery process. Whew, that's a lot of stuff and very exciting. But I'm happy to talk about it. So I want to first say that I think reusable containers for food are on hold right now with some good reason. I think during a pandemic, and totally reasonable. But there are a whole bunch of local actions that are taken to encourage reusable containers for food. So a lot of people don't know this, but you can walk up to a deli counter in a grocery store, hand them your own container, and have them fill it up with whatever you need. You don't need to use their containers. Like I said, that's likely on hold in a lot of places right now. But how many people didn't know that? Probably a lot. Just simple education like that. And that kind of education really happens best at the local level. So at the EC level, reaching out to their own constituents. And same answer for educate on behavior change and redesigning food delivery process. The food delivery process I don't think is easy, but there are some really exciting innovations, something called Loop that I believe Sheila has partaken in and wishes she could do a little bit more. But essentially you get a reusable container, kind of like those Instacart coolers that are sectioned off, and you get a container full of like shampoo, and you send those containers back when you're done, and then they ship it back to you refilled. So you're actually just reusing the same container, and Loop is the one that fills up with, there's a whole bunch of like household products that they have. So that's an idea. However, a lot of that is probably at the business level. It's probably not something that us commoners can do. And when it comes to landfills, a lot of it, a lot of it just comes down to we always say this, if your tub is overflowing, the first thing you do isn't you grab a mop, it's that you turn off the faucet. So the first step we need to do is to stop using virgin plastic. I think the recycled content bill is going to be really exciting, a really good step forward in keeping that plastic out of landfills. One of the problems right now is that there's really no market for that plastic for numbers 3 through 7. So I'm not saying recycled content is going to be a save all, but it's certainly going to be a step forward. I believe there was one more question for me about stormwater. Yes, our stormwater ordinance will be on our website shortly as soon as Alex gets around to it. It is the same as the Watershed Institute's model stormwater ordinance. We worked on it together. I just need to actually put it on our website. And someone asked about municipalities that have already adopted enhanced ordinances. We don't have that information yet. But if you are an EC that is interested in chatting with someone who has adopted enhanced ordinances in the past, we can certainly put you in touch with someone. The first one that pops up in mine is Princeton. We've actually taken a lot of what they have done in the past and put it into our current stormwater enhanced ordinance. So they are doing very exciting things. Okay, now I will stop talking and we will go to Tom. So Tom, you have a bunch of questions. First is my good friend Kathleen just asks, Pilgrim Pipeline?
Yeah, and it's good to hear from Kathleen. It's been a while since I've connected with Kathleen as well. I have not heard anything about the Pilgrim Pipeline in quite some time. So that was a proposed oil pipeline that I think would have brought crude oil down to, I think it was Linden, and for refinement, and then back up to the Albany area. As far as I know, that project is not being pursued by the developer. I haven't heard a peep about it in years. But if anyone has more information about that, please say the word.
No news is good news.
No news is good news.
Great, thank you for that. Next, we have a question from Dennis. Is there currently adequate clean supply or approved clean energy projects to support the demand if all opposed fossil fuels projects are rejected? If not, could new clean projects meet demands?
So that's a really interesting question. So I guess I want to answer that in a couple of ways. First, I would say at the moment, as we stand today, we know that we have the energy, we have more than enough energy to meet New Jersey's current demand. So for example, when you talk about these gas pipelines and the PennEast Pipeline, one of the things that gas experts and New Jersey's ratepayer advocate found when they dug into that project is that there's no public need for the project. And so for example, even on the coldest days of the year when demand for gas is at its greatest, New Jersey has excess gas that's flowing out of the pipelines to other regions of the country, to the south in particular. So we have more than enough right now, and so we don't need projects like PennEast. So that's where we are today. Now the challenge is that when you think about these ambitious goals that are laid out in the Global Warming Response Act and how we have to reduce, so we have to reduce emissions, we have to get to net zero in the electric sector by 2050, right? And as another astute participant pointed out in one of their questions, as we electrify the transportation sector and we electrify the building sector, that's going to increase demand for electricity. It's actually projected to double. So what we have to do going forward, we have to significantly ramp up renewable energy and employ other strategies like increased energy efficiency and energy storage and demand response, where you're shifting around the demand curve throughout the course of the day to smooth out those peaks. There's a whole set of strategies laid out in the Energy Master Plan that are going to be required to transition away from and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and ramp up renewable and other clean energy resources in a major way over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So as we stand here today, we don't need these fossil fuel infrastructure projects. As we move forward, we're going to need them even less, because we can't meet our emissions goals unless we have less fossil fuels than we have today, right? But we have a huge, enormous challenge to ramp up renewables and clean energy resources at you know, I mean, this is like people talk about like, you know, like try this as like a war mobilization effort. I mean, you know, the magnitude of change that's needed is at that scale, like the response to the pandemic. And a lot of people are drawing parallels saying, you know, look, to deal with climate change, we have to have like a global mobilization, you know, that's similar to how we should be and need to be dealing with the pandemic.
Thank you. Yes, we are all soldiers in this fight, I think is a good metaphor for that. Okay, super simple question. Is fracking 100% banned in New Jersey?
Fracking is not 100% banned in New Jersey. There isn't fracking occurring in New Jersey. The fracking is occurring, you know, a lot of it in Pennsylvania, where the shale deposits are. So there is a ban on fracking waste in New Jersey, and so that's the concern, is that some of those waste from the fracking process, we don't want them to be, you know, deposited into waterways and other places within the state. My understanding is there are some deeper deposits in New Jersey that can't currently be fracked with existing technology, but there is some concern that that's a possibility down the road if the technology would enable, you know, to reach those deeper deposits.
Henry, I'm interested. Can you talk a little bit more about Lyle's question about since people are no longer commuting, how will that affect like funding and everything at the state level for transportation? You're muted.
Can't hear you, Henry.
Sorry. Yes, that's a great question. I think Lyle and I are going to try and touch base offline, but ultimately, one thing that we saw from COVID is it's actually, you know, globally, you know, people were able to see vistas and sites that they haven't seen in quite some time due to a reduction in air pollution, in that localized air pollution that we saw, you know, from big trucks. It removes smog from the air. And so you're able to, you know, see further on really bright and sunny days. And there's also the added impact, though, is that so in New Jersey, we get a lot of our money from our gas tax and from tolls, which go into our transportation trust fund, which is the really big fund that helps pay for roads and bridges and all those essential transportation infrastructures. And so we did see a reduction in revenues. And so, you know, it is a user fee. So if you don't use it, you lose it. And so there are opportunities to get some federal money for it. We actually saw, in terms of NJ Transit, we actually saw a really big chunk of money come from the federal government in the CARES Act COVID stimulus funding. It was about 1.25 billion, but similarly with NJ Transit ridership in, I believe it was April or May, there was an 88% decline in ridership, and there was a resulting similar decline in revenue that was experienced. And so that money was, you know, more than needed, just because, as we all know, NJ Transit has been struggling for some time. Just any type of reductions in revenue is going to really hurt its ability to get back on its feet and be the national model for transportation that it once was. And that model wasn't actually too long ago. It was about 15 years ago. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. And just to be cognizant of time, we do have about 5 minutes left. So if we don't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to info@anjac, and we can try to put you in touch with, if it's not us that can answer it, one of the appropriate people. We are getting a lot of questions, Tom, about solar. So I'm going to try to wrap these kind of up into one. A lot of them kind of have to do with, okay, so what is a good place to put solar? Are there funding sources available if you want to do local solar? How viable are the solar panels that we have right now? Try to answer all of those in about 5 minutes.
Okay. So I'll start with like where are good places to put solar. So thus far, a lot of New Jersey's policies have focused on putting solar on more our existing disturbed locations of various kinds. So for example, I mentioned the community solar pilot program gives preference to projects that are on brownfields, landfills, rooftops, parking lots. And DEP's 2017 solar siting analysis identified those as preferred locations, and places like forests and wetlands and farmland as non-preferred locations. And so that's kind of where I think New Jersey's been. But I think when you look at the targets, these incredibly aggressive targets as far as the ramp up of renewables that are needed, and the targets specifically that are being set for solar, I think the reality is that we need to maximize all those opportunities, but we're probably also going to need to entertain some larger projects on open lands as well. And there, I think the language in the Energy Master Plan and the Global Warming Response Act report is very similar, is emphasizing marginal lands. And I think, honestly, we need more work to define what those lands are. But one example that's given is, let's look to farmland that doesn't have the best soil, right? And so, and we've done some analysis of that, and found there's, I want to say it was about 30,000 acres of farmland in blocks of 100 acres or more outside of like the agricultural development areas, which are the areas that are primarily prioritized for preservation. So we need to look there. Frankly, I think we need the agencies to get together, consider the best available data, and consider the needs of solar developers as well, and put it all together and come up. This is planning, right? We need some planning to identify places that can meet our solar needs without conflicting with important preservation goals. So I'm sorry, Alex, what was the second piece of that question?
And then what about the viability of solar panels? So a lot of people are worried about, as the older ones retire, what happens to them? Are the newer ones better, et cetera, et cetera?
That's not something that I feel like I've got a lot of expertise on. I know that solar panels are getting increasingly efficient. I know that the cost of solar continues to just come down. I mean, there were just some figures that came out this week. In many places, the cost of solar and onshore wind in particular is equivalent to or even cheaper than building like a new gas-fired power plant. I know there are waste concerns. I think the life cycle of these panels and projects are typically about 30 years. And so there are issues and concerns about where those panels go, and there's a lot of heavy metals that are there are real issues there. There's no free ride. There's no perfect zero impact energy source other than energy efficiency, but we can't get to zero with energy efficiency, unfortunately. So we need energy, and there's no perfect, but solar and wind are so far superior to fossil fuels. We know the havoc that fossil fuels are wreaking, and we need to continue to find the best and most sensitive ways that we can do wind and solar. And the technology is only going to, that's the beauty. The technology is only going to get better. It's only going to get more efficient. It's only going to get cheaper, right? And so I think the future's bright with those technologies.
Well, thank you for ending on such a wonderfully high note. That concludes my portion of the presentation, so I'll hand it over to Liz for any closing remarks.
Thank you, everybody. I think on behalf of ANJAC, I just want to thank Tom and Henry, especially for speaking and joining us, and all the Environmental Commission members and the audience. And if you have any questions, as Alex mentioned, you can email us at info@anjac.org, and we will get your question either to Tom or Henry if we can't answer it ourselves, or even to somebody else if we need to. So the recording of this session will be available in a day or two, and as registered Congress people, you will get a link to this recording so you can refer back to it or share it with other people. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tom and Henry, and have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.